Hi everyone, Trina here, and this is 1.8 of the Hidden Divine and all that is entailing with it. So we were getting ready to go into the circle, to convene in the circle, and Shasta had just agreed to take Trisha on as her student. So we had just got done going over the north gate, and we were getting ready to enter the circle. So chapter 5. The circle convenes. Okay. Oh, I got a crazy hair. Okay. February 2nd. Bridget's Day. I could just make out Shasta's cottage against the glooming indigo twilight sky as I parked on the dead-end street that led to her home. Inside the windows, I could see the candlelight winking through the windows. Tonight was the first meeting of the Sacred Circle, and I was nervous. I made my way slowly up the shadowed walk, onto the wooden porch. I could feel my heart beating in my chest. I opened the front door to see a cheerful fire blazing in the fireplace. The candles illuminating the altars in the corners of the room. In front of the merry crackle of the winter's fire were a dozen women seated in a circle on the floor. They looked up as I entered and smiled and wondered whom I might know in this circle. I took my seat quietly on the large open cushion that was waiting for me, feeling the deep magic of this house enveloping us in its arms. You are in perfect time, Shasta said, indicating that we should all go around the circle and introduce ourselves. My eyes registered the long feminine skirts and the shawls of many of the women there, but I was dressed in leggings, boots, and a sweater, my normal garb for a winter's day. This show of graceful femininity was quite a change from the male-dominated world of photography and advertising that I was used to in my daily life. Even as a clairvoyant who did readings for others, I always dressed in a practical, non-girly way. Like many people I knew, my life seemed to straddle two worlds. My Clark Kent world of photography and art direction and advertising, and my spiritual world where I help people in need through my readings. As I entered Shasta's living room, I counted 13 women in all, 12 around the one teacher. That was the same number that Jesus had used, putting himself at the center of the circle, like the sun, in the middle of the 12 signs of the zodiac. Interesting coincidence, I reflected, wondering if the numbers of women gathered here had been a deliberate or a divine act of providence. As the ladies began to introduce themselves, I learned that these were intelligent, articulate women who ranged from homemakers to directors of multinational companies. There was Meg, a short, slender blonde, who worked as a liaison for an international affairs based out of Washington, D.C. Claudia, a stylish makeup artist from Los Angeles with an Emmy Award under her belt. Susan, sexy sales representative. Donna, accountant. Alexis, shy tomboy with freckles. Emerald, a large overweight head secretary at a large firm for law. And Sarah, a bright massage therapist and singer. These were all smart, attractive women who had been on their own spiritual path for many years. Sophia, Isis, and Mary. When we had finished our introductions, Shasta greeted us warmly and welcomed to the circle the goddess. Tonight we begin a journey into the heart of the mysteries. This path is a journey of self-discovery, not only about ourselves, but about the hidden history of our planet. The goddess teaches a path of the heart, a path that all life is sacred, and that the intelligence that moves through the universe moves through each of us as well. This path honors the living energies of the earth and the spiritual beings behind in the cosmos. It honors the energetic connections between people, animals, and how we are all linked together in a symbiotic web of light. A symbiotic web of light. That is beautiful. As she spoke, I could feel that the connection with my inner sense, not only to the women in the circle, but to all the people I loved, and no matter where they lived across the planet. Throughout the centuries, the goddess has been known by many different names in many different cultures. In Christianity, she is Mary, the great mother of compassion. In Judaism, she is known as Sophia, the goddess of wisdom. In India, China, and Japan, she is Lakshmi, the mother of generosity, who dwells in the great cosmic egg with Vishnu, her eternal mate. She is also Sarasvati, the goddess of creativity, and Durga, the vanquisher of demons. She is named Parvati, the mother of the universe, and Kali, the great transformer, who rules the cycles of death and rebirth. In China, she is embodied in Kuan Yin, the Bodhisattva of children. In Japan, she is Amaterasu, the goddess of the sun. Those are only a few of her many faces. Shasta looked around the circle. Our eyes were wide with wonder. I had never even heard of most of these goddesses, although I had seen pictures of a few of them. Honoring the goddess was the first theology of our ancestors. They believed that the creator of the universe is female. But in the last few thousand years, people have forgotten who she is. And so now, the world has fallen out of balance. Our path is about remembering her place in creation and restoring balance to the world. I couldn't agree with that more. Right now, in this moment, this time, it seems like that is exactly what we need to restore the balance of our world. Emerald and Meg were nodding. The path of the goddess teaches us to attune to the invisible world of spirit and the connections behind all that we see. To become a priest or a priestess, a healer or a shaman, is to learn to walk between the worlds, to become a mediator between the realms of spirit and the realms of the mortals. It is not about leaving the physical worlds behind or generating the worlds of matter. It is rather about seeing the sacred worlds of spirit beneath the visible world and rejoicing in it. This physical body is the vessel that we are given in this lifetime to communicate with the seen and unseen forces of the divine. And long ago, it was believed that the female was the natural mediator between the earth, the sky, and the physical and spiritual realms. Thus, we are about establishing a conscious partnership with the divine and learning to take responsibility for our own lives. In the end, this path is also about discovering the divine spark within every creature and within every one of you. Her words fell into a deep place within me. The goddess gives birth to all that lives, and she takes back into herself all that ever was. She shows us the cyclical patterns of life and regeneration, and she is forever in a state of change. Thus, the Indians called her Changing Woman, for she rules all the cycles of time. We women have all the same characteristics of the goddess. We bleed, we give birth, we nurture the unborn, we tend to the dying, and we celebrate the many natural transitions of life. Yes, I thought birthdays, graduations, funerals, and the birth of children were all things that my mother had honored, even though sometimes I forgot them. And holidays, my mother was the first one to call the family together around Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, dinners, or to send thoughtful cards or gifts for a nephew's graduation. In Egypt, she is known as Isis. She of 10,000 names, of 10,000 faces, the female I am principle of the great mysteries. Her true name was Auset, and her husband was Sar, the ancient name for Osiris and Isis. Isis was also called Aehu, a term meaning high dove. Wow. And Isa, the first of all created beings. Wow. Ayahu and Isa, high dove and first of all created beings. Wow. She was a sister, a daughter, a mother, a wife, a widow, a queen. When she fled from the dark forces that swept Egypt during the reign of Set, her evil half-brother, she even became a refuge. Then, along with her son Horus, Isis became the savior goddess whose cunning and insight helped to rescue Egypt from 350 years of darkness. Our faces were wrapped with attention. We could almost see the images of her words painted, and I felt that Isis was so real, so easy to relate to, as if she could have been any one of us. Isis lies within every woman, and every woman is Isis. For we each have the potential to experience all of these aspects of ourselves. Daughter, sister, lover, wife, mother, and wisdom keeper. Isis established the first of the mystery schools in Egypt, and then assisted by her father Thoth, her husband Osiris, and later her courageous son Horus. When Osiris was murdered by Set, Isis brought up Horus in secret so that he would one day be strong enough to challenge his uncle. Those who followed her became known as the Sons of the Widow. Ooh, one of the titles still used by Freemasons even today. The Sons of the Widow, I pondered the depth of what that phrase implied. It seemed to exude the sorrow of her loss and the spirit of her husband as an eternal presence beside her. The spiritual temples of Isis taught that there was one great creator behind all the many faces, or the facets of God. Wow. Gods and goddesses, and all that is, the divine spark that dwells within the gods, dwells within us as well. The mystery schools taught that. It is the balance between the male and the female that brings us mastery. If we neglect either side of our natures, we will not achieve it. But because the Divine Mother has been forgotten for so many centuries, this garden is dedicated to her. The light from the fire danced across her face as we drank in her words. For over 7,000 years, Isis was worshipped in temples across the world, from Egypt to Britain, Rome, Turkey. She was the faithful wife, the courageous mother, the great queen, the gifted healer, the wise teacher, and the great civilizer. And for the last 2 millennia, she has continued to be honored as Mary Magdalene, another widow once married to a great world Savior. A collective gasp echoed through the room. Mary Magdalene? What did she have to do with Isis? As you will learn, Mary the Magdala, or the Great Mary, was trained as a priestess of Isis in the temples of Egypt. The knowledge of who she really was the female equivalent to the partner of Jesus Christ. They were forced underground by the patriarchy, although Jesus had called her the apostle who knew the all. All of us in the circle seemed to be holding our breath. In all the great temples of wisdom, there were always 2 levels of learning: the outer, or the lesser mysteries, and the inner, or the greater mysteries. In the Christian teachings, Peter was entrusted with the outer mysteries, while Mary Magdalene was gifted with the inner and the greater ones. But these teachings of balance between the masculine and the feminine and her role were suppressed by the Orthodox Church. And because of that suppression, the true secrets of mastery are largely unknown to us today. And this is what I've been being told over and over again right now, that we need to start to remember, because each one of us, we all have different parts of this history. We've all of us here, we've all been priestess, record keepers, scribes. We've all done these different parts and these different, we've learned these different things from these past times. And we're supposed to start to remember these things, because these gifts and these treasures we're supposed to be bringing forth right now. And a lot of this is the memory of how we achieve homeostasis within our being, which is by balancing the masculine and the feminine duality of which we truly are. And these teachings are absolutely true, because these things must be in balance, or we fully cannot be operating 100%, because you're 50% non-active or dormant. And that's just truth. You could feel the entire circle to exhale, and as my mind began to race. At the time when I first began to study with Shasta in 1985, the Gospel of Philip had not yet been published, nor had many of the hidden Gospels, discovered in the writings of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code was not published until 2004. It had not yet been released. These books examined the revelations that Mary Magdalene had been the wife or the spiritual companion of Jesus, and had been entrusted to impart his deeper wisdom. In the years after the crucifixion, in the Gospel of Philip, we read about how Jesus used to kiss Mary on the mouth, and that for his love for her was deep and abiding. All of his disciples he loved. He loved his companion most, Mary Magdalene, and he kissed her. The disciples asked, "Why do you love her most?" He answered, "When a blind and sighted man are both in darkness, they are equal. When light dawns, he who can see will know the light. He who is blind will stay in the dark." Yet, at this time, this was a totally new concept and largely unknown to the world. My mind grappled to understand the meaning of Shasta's words. Like Isis, Mary Magdalene had become the Black Madonna, the hidden goddess of wisdom, who must re-emerge so that the world might return into balance. I will have to learn more about this, I thought, as I was wondering how I could begin to discover the hidden history of the Magdalene. Later, I would learn that the Sons of the Widow was a title used by the early Gnostic Christians, followers of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. Both Isis and Mary Magdalene had been widowed through the loss of their enlightened husbands. Shasta lifted her chin, directing the emerald to stir the fire pot. The popping of the logs sounded loud in the chilly room. When the fire had begun to burn brightly again, Shasta resumed. We will speak more of these subjects in the months to come, but tonight we begin our year of study on the eve of the Candlemas, one of the 8 high holy days of the year. Shasta picked up an unlit box of candles beside her, passing them around in the circle. We each took a candle and then passed it to the next person. In the Celtic world, February 2nd was the festival of Bridget, a triple goddess with 3 major forms: the maiden, the mother, and the matron. Bridget governed the arts of healing, knowledge, agriculture, and smithcraft. She was also the patron goddess of writing. Her temples at Kildare in Ireland had clear running springs and a fire that was constantly maintained in the temples by the priest and the priestess, like the ever-burning shrines of Vesta in the Vestal Virgins in Rome. This fire was dedicated to truth, illumination, and knowledge. Shasta lit her candle and then reached over and touched the flame of the wick of the candle that Claudia held. Claudia offered its bright fire to Meg, passing the light around the circle. Later, when the Catholics could not get rid of Bridget, the bride, her history was rewritten by the church, and she was turned into a Christian saint named Bridget, and the nunneries were set up in her name. Worship of her became mixed with the worship of both Mary, the Mother, and Mary, the Magdalene. Since both women had spent time in Britain amongst the Druids, Bridget, the bride, became known as the Queen of Heaven, Mother of my Sovereign, Prophetess of the Christ, and Mother of Jesus. Like the two Marys, Bridget was both a bride and a mother. And this is the picture they were showing of Bridget. And it says below, Bridget, the Celtic goddess of illumination, governs healing, smithcraft, agriculture, and knowledge. She is therefore a triple goddess who is associated with both fire and water. Her major sanctuaries at Kildare, Ireland, kept the eternal flame of wisdom alive for centuries. Later, this same divinity became known as Hestia in Greece and Vesta in Rome. Her shrines were attended by the 6 Vestal Virgins, who were entrusted to keep the fires of illumination alight for all of humanity. These fires were extinguished by the order of the Catholic Church in 382 CE. Illumination and illustration was done by Tricia McCannon. And Tricia is the author of this beautiful book. So I'll back up a little bit. Y'all, I would get these books and put them in your library because, you know, this information always seems to somehow try to be suppressed or hidden. So the more of us that have it, the better off we'll all be. This wisdom is so deep and it speaks such a beautiful truth to us that we forgot. And these things have been hidden for a very long time. So it's time to start to remember the path of the divine feminine and the path of the goddess, because the power of that is such an integral part of Earth and our subconscious mind and our feelings, our intuition. All of it is Mother. Everything here comes through Mother. And these teachings and this honoring of the feminine that is inside of every single one of us has been completely suppressed, lost, and forgotten. So we need to honor both the masculine and the feminine together in unity. So as she was known as Bridget, who was both bride and mother. The flame had almost reached me. I touched my unlit candle to Sarah's and watched the living flame leap unto my wick. Bridget's symbols are the sacred flame of illumination and the waters of eternal healing. Wow. Her symbols that were also sacred to Isis. Shasta looked around the circle at the illumined faces of all the women. Tonight we light these candles for them, for Bridget, Isis, Mary, and Mary Magdalene, the hidden bride whose light must be rekindled in the world. I heard of St. Bridget in England, and I wondered if she was really Isis, the widowed bride, and if she had become Mary Magdalene, the hidden bride of Jesus. But whoever she had been originally to the church had rewritten her history, and through the repetition of her story, her original identity had been subdued. It seemed as if the old adage, if you can't beat 'em, adopt 'em, it was at work here, or at least in this case. They had seized the energies of the existing deity and pretended that it was their own. Later I would learn that this is exactly what the church had done with many of the ancient deities and temples, having seized over 500 temples to the ancient mother across Britain, France, Italy, Greece, Germany, Spain, and Portugal. I saw one in Patmos in Greece that is just beautiful, and it's still there, and it's still the Church of the Virgin Mother, and it was beautiful. The only temple church I've ever been in that was completely 100% about the Mary and the worship of her. At least they still acknowledged the sacred feminine. I thought even if they had maligned it, I reflected on how Bridget's holiday fell on a winter season of darkness, when native peoples must have despaired of ever seeing the sun again. Bridget was the bringer of hope and light. Perhaps now, when the world has forgotten the light of the feminine face of God, we could help her to return. Shasta was speaking again. We light candles to Bridget as a way of affirming that despite the seeming darkness, we believe that the light and the love and the truth will return, and that all people of earth will one day awaken from their spiritual slumber. It seemed to me that our tiny flames symbolized the hope of women everywhere, and that there would soon come a time when women were not beaten, marginalized, or oppressed. Our candles in that tiny room were like the kindling of hope that the light would dawn once again for the women across the world, and with it, the healing would come to the earth. Let us go round the circle now and share the blessing for the world. Claudia spoke first. I just wish that people were kinder to one another. We took a breath. That would be nice. I thought kindness and tolerance were not so easy to come by. Meg lifted her candle. I wish that women could be treated fairly across the world and not made to hide their faces with burqas and face veils and forced to have clitorectomies, which is a thing they practice on women to remove their clitoris so they'll never experience sexual pleasure. It's still done across parts of the world today. I hope it stops too. I had heard of this barbaric practice among the Muslim nations. Many men in Africa and in the Middle East continue to force their daughters to have their sex organs of pleasure surgically removed so that they would only be good for serving man's pleasure and never experience their own. It is a horrible custom, and it took away a woman's enjoyment of sex. Furthermore, they had convinced the older women to do that to their own daughters as if it was their own good. It's barbaric. Sarah spoke next. If I could wish anything, it would be to put an end to sexual slavery. Children are sold into slavery every day across the world, and women are kidnapped and forced to become prostitutes, to serve men, and then die. This has got to stop. Holy smokes, this was getting deep. As bad as things sometimes seem for women in free countries, there were 1,000,000 times worse for women in other parts of the world. Emerald spoke next. I just want to get equal pay for equal work, if you know what I mean. We all laughed. Leave it to a legal secretary to bring things back into the basics. A legal secretary. Cute. Susan spoke next. I would just like to offer my blessings to all the women who have been abused by men through domestic violence. The runaway girls, the beat-up wives, the girlfriends who are too afraid to leave their boyfriends because they don't have enough self-esteem. Yes, I know the statistics show that a woman is raped somewhere in North America every 13 seconds. And that does not include the countries where women are more oppressed. Statistics from the U.S. Department of Justice show that the intimate partner homicides make up 40 to 50% of all murders of women in the United States. I took a breath. Now it was my turn. I wasn't sure what I wanted to say. I had always been a tomboy in my parents' house, and I had refused to let myself be defined by what being just a woman meant. I would like to give a blessing to people like Shasta, who are carrying this ancient knowledge forward and who are here to share it with us today. I know my words were lame to all the amazing things that the other women had said, They just felt right to me. If Shasta were not around to make us aware of another perspective, then we may not ever realize it. Things that were happening to women around the world were essentially wrong. This information was critical for us to awaken. I barely heard what the other women said as we completed our ritual, and when we were done, we put our candles into our holders at the center of our circle. Then we took a deep breath. Tonight, I wish to share some of the precepts of the Goddess Path, Shasta said. As you begin to examine your own belief systems, you may want to consider these. Several of these women pulled out notebooks, but Shasta stopped them. No, just take this in and let it live within you. We put our pencils down. First, the path of the Goddess teaches us that we are each responsible for our own spiritual development. You are responsible for deciding who or what the divine is for you and forming a relationship with that presence. No one can do this for you but yourself. Like all relationships, this takes time and effort, but you will find that what you put into it is what you will get out of it. The more time you spend in nature and in contemplation or in self-discovery, the more quickly you will grow. This means that the path of enlightenment is up to you. I nodded. I had already discovered that the constant chatter in our daily lives it continually tried to pull us into the mayhem and distraction. By creating an altar in my home, I was reminded to spend more time in cultivating the active connection with Spirit. Shasta continued, the path of the Goddess teaches us that all things contain a spark of the infinite, and thus all beings are sacred. Since consciousness can communicate with consciousness, each part of the whole can communicate with every other part. Whether we are talking about a plant, an animal, a rock, or the elements, these parts often cooperate with one another to accomplish very specific ends. Sorry, I need a drink. Okay, sorry, I had to get a drink. I was so thirsty. Okay, like to accomplish very specific ends. Like the spirit of the herbs for healing or incenses for sacred ceremony, our thoughts can interface with everything around us. The stars, the moon, the earth, the elements. By honoring the sacred gifts, they can assist us in our journey. This is an interactive process. She paused and looked at us. Are you following me? We nodded, afraid to interrupt the train of thought. The path of the Goddess also embraces the belief that consciousness survives beyond death, and that nothing of spirit is ever really lost. Matter converts to energy and back again. The fundamental discovery of physicist Albert Einstein. Energy equals mc squared. E equals mc squared. We grow, we evolve, we change. And yet, as souls, we are eternal. This is the wisdom of the changing woman who rules the cycles of life. When we die, we open a door into another dimension, and we pass into it. When we are born, we open a door into this world, and we return to live in a physical body. This was taught within the Eleusinian mysteries of Greece. The lesser mysteries were dedicated to the Divine Mother and Daughter, Demeter and Persephone, just as the second-level mysteries were dedicated to the Father and the sun. Do any of you know the story of Demeter and Persephone? Shasta looked around the circle. 7 of the women shook their heads. Wasn't that the story of how the Greeks explained the 4 seasons? I thought in fall and winter, Persephone descended into the underworld. Then in the spring and summer, she returned to her mother, Demeter, who was so happy to have her daughter back that the spring came into bloom. The myths and the stories are tales used by the ancients to encode a deeper level of knowledge. Because even if the meaning got lost, the story would be remembered. While in the uninitiated know only the surface meaning, the initiated understand the real significance behind the legend. So when we seek to understand a goddess or her wisdom, we begin by learning her story. In this tale, it is also helpful to know that Persephone was also called Kore, or kernel, a small seed that falls from the wheat shaft. The seed, it is the innocent virgin of potential that lies inside of each of us. The kernel that comes from the tree of life. The tree of life? A subject I would have to explore in more depth. I need another drink. Hold on. We've been going 41 minutes. Okay. In the Greek, and I'm out of water. Did you hear? Okay. In the Greek story, Persephone, the daughter of Demeter, was out in the fields picking up flowers. One day, when suddenly the ground opened up around her, Hades, the lord of the underworld, emerged with his golden chariot and 12 black horses, swooping up the innocent maiden. Hades carried her down into the underworld, Demeter not knowing where her daughter had gone. She searched everywhere, but she could not find her. Over time, she grew sick with worry, so the plants began to die. For 1 full year, the earth fell into drought, and eventually, even the gods themselves were suffering. They petitioned Demeter to bring back the bounty of the earth, but without Persephone, Demeter had no reason to bring back earth's bounty. Eventually, Thoth, or Hermes, the great Greek god of wisdom, told Demeter that Persephone was in the underworld, and Demeter demanded that Hades was to release her. Because her daughter had eaten 6 red pomegranate seeds during her year of captivity, the gods decreed that she must remain in the underworld for 6 months out of the year. The other 6 months she could return to her mother in heaven. Shasta looked around the circle. So what is the meaning of this story? We all exchanged glances. The only thing that I could think of was that I had been taught in high school this was how our ancestors had explained the seasons. Some of the other women made half-hearted suggestions, but I could see from Shasta's stillness that we had not decoded the meaning. At last she sighed. This is a metaphor for each of us, a parable about our cycles of rebirth, reincarnation. Rebirth, what did she mean? Half the time we live in heaven with God, the Mother, and the other half of the time we descend into the physical. The worlds, the physical worlds, and we forget who we are. This was the metaphor for the evolution of the soul. Our world is the realm of light and shadow, the underworld, a land of illusion and confusion. We are living in the underworld today. When we return to our mother, the Queen of Heaven, we return to the realms of celestial light. Oh, I had never understood this parable before, because I had always thought of God as a male. Wow, it had been there right in front of me the whole time. What do the pomegranate seeds represent? Claudia asked. Shasta looked around the room. Does anybody have any ideas? Were they good seeds or bad? I wondered. Was Persephone supposed to eat them or not? At last Shasta answered. They are the seeds of karma that each of us sow when we come into the world of shadows. This took a moment to sink in. The seeds remind us that we can get ourselves trapped in the world through fear and desire, and that we must return to be reborn on the wheel of life. Donna and Alexis shifted in their seats, perhaps thinking of the actions that had bound them to the wheel. The seeds are sweet, but they can also bind us to the great wheel of Awagawan, the wheel of life, death, and rebirth. She let a full minute go by while we all sat to just digest this. Shasta unwound herself from the floor. Now let us get up and dance. We will dance our joy that we are here on earth at this time, and that we are waking up. Let us experience the sweetness of life without being bound to the wheel. So in this ceremony, we will return the pomegranate seeds to the center, symbolizing our liberation from our past karma. Slowly we got to our feet. Shasta picked up a basket of rattles and passed them around. She turned on some music. I took a rattle and we began to dance. Not sure what I was doing, I began to dance. But as the music seeped into my blood, I began to move into an altered state. We spun in circles around the room as the chant moved over us. Dissolve the seeds of time and space. Return them to the light with grace. Remember who we've always been. Reclaim the soul that lies within. Bring the light into the worlds of form, that who we are might be reborn. I felt the spirits of other dancers, time, out of mind, who had been there before us. Finally, Shasta brought us into a sacred circle again. When the dance was over, we laced our arms around one another, shoulders. Tonight is a good beginning. In the months ahead, I encourage each of you to learn more about how the Divine Mother and her history has been hidden from the world. We will meet again in 4 weeks' time, just before the season of Eostara, the ancient mother of rebirth, the time of new beginnings. In the meantime, I suggest that you do some reading and find some answers for yourselves. I looked around the circle, feeling blessed to be among such wonderful sisters of light. In the goddess tradition, Shasta said, we close our circles by saying, the circle is open, but unbroken. Merry meet, merry part, and merry meet again. Blessed be. So, I will have to wrap it up. And we are going all the way to chapter 6. I couldn't even find a place to stop with that, so we went really long on this video. But it was something that needed to continue. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. That was fascinating to me. I've never got to participate in a ceremony of the goddess like that, and I could completely see it in my mind, and I got to go on the journey of it, and it's beautiful. And wow, I learned a lot about it, so I hope you guys did too. Like I said, I read this with you, so I don't know what's coming. So we're on this ride together, and it resonates with every ounce of my heart and soul. So I hope it resonates for you too. So I love y'all. Namaste. Blessed be all of us, and favor and love fill you all to overflow today and always. May soul and spirit be with us always. And to me, soul and spirit means mother and father. So I love you all. May we blend the power of our divinity through understanding our feminine and masculine incorporation, which creates our Trinity. So I love you, and I'll see you on the next one.